on the 23rd of February 1946, inside of Laguna prison camp, a very well-known Japanese general of the Second World War was led to the gallows for his execution. He climbed up the 13 steps of the gallows and was then asked for final words, and he reeled off a long statement and asked people to pray for him before he exonerated his executioner of the responsibility for taking his life. Throughout the Second World War and the conflicts before, it's believed that up to 14 million civilians and people were slaughtered by Japanese soldiers, and there were many Japanese generals and senior military leaders who were sought at the end of the war to answer for crimes that their men committed. One man who was captured was General Tomoyuki Yamashita, who was known as the Tiger of Malaya. Yamashita's actions during the Second World War led to the biggest military capitulation in British military history, as he took Singapore, and despite his skill as a general, he was hanged by the Allies for war crimes, and for his involvement in the horrors that his soldiers committed. But should Yamashita have gone to his execution for his crimes? Welcome to The Untold Past. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Yamashita was born on the 8th of November 1885, and despite his father being a doctor, he always dreamed of a career inside the Japanese army. In 1905 he graduated from the military academy, and was stated to have been top of his class. He saw action during the First World War, and this began a long line of promotions, as he was made captain in May 1916, and then in the 1920s he was sent as a Japanese military attaché to go and work around Europe in different cities. He was even sent to Berlin, and he was 2 years later made the rank of a major. But then inside the Japanese War Ministry, Yamashita had big plans to make the army as efficient as possible, and he came into contact with the Emperor, even working within the imperial headquarters. He was seen by some as a possible rival, and in particular Hideki Tojo, the future war minister and prime minister of Japan, viewed him with suspicion. But Emperor Hirohito did turn his back on him slightly due to an issue regarding rebel officers who were involved in an attempted coup, and Yamashita then resigned from the army as he could not support the emperor's decisions. However, in the conflicts before the Second World War broke out across Europe, Japan were involved in some brutal and terrifying campaigns in China and other lands. Yamashita wanted to bring an end to the conflict with China, and he wanted to ensure that peace existed between Japan, America and Britain, but this was not what other senior members of government wanted to hear. He was brought back into service and was given command of the 4th Division in northern China, but was also sent to meet with Hitler and Mussolini in Europe. General Yamashita wanted progression for the army, but his tension with Hideki Tojo continued, and he was given command on the 6th of November 1941 of the 25th Army, and was involved in heavy fighting in Malaya. The Malayan campaign came to an end as Singapore fell to the Japanese, and in February 1942, Yamashita's Japanese soldiers pushed through defending lines, and his 30,000 soldiers captured roughly 80,000 British, Indian and Australian forces. This was a huge defeat for the British, and the largest surrender in their military history, but Yamashita gained a fearsome reputation, and he became known as the Tiger of Malaya, and his men were then sent into Singapore to occupy the lands. But his soldiers committed large amounts of war crimes in the region. For example, they were involved in the Alexandria Hospital massacre. During this terrible event, a number of Japanese soldiers broke into the hospital and slaughtered doctors and nurses with their rifles and bayonets, and they also murdered a number of patients. A lot of patients then became prisoners, and they were forced into small rooms with little air, and they were given no food and water, and more people died because of this. Further slaughter occurred at Sukchang, with estimates putting the death toll between 25,000 to 50,000 people. Specifically, the Japanese tried to introduce ethnic cleansing in the region, and they wanted to kill and expel ethnic Chinese people who were said to have been their true enemy, and with this many of Yamashita's men executed civilians and prisoners of war willingly. It is unclear whether Yamashita actually ordered these executions, or whether he understood and knew what was happening. However, an order to execute 50,000 Chinese people was sent from senior officers within his military command, and his soldiers regularly carried out massacres after battles to strike fear into the hearts of the public. When Yamashita learned of the actions, he tried to punish some of his soldiers, and he allegedly gave an order that no soldier should get involved in assault, arson or looting, and that those who did would be subjected to strict punishments. But regardless, these warnings were ignored, and the horror continued. Yamashita did himself spare some prisoners of war and treat them well, but the War Ministry hated this. He was then, in July 1942, assigned to Manchukuo, and was given command responsibility for the 1st Area Army. This was seen by some as a downgrade, as he was given the post to remain in a less prominent role, and Tojo was the man behind the switch. But as the Second World War turned against the Japanese, General Yamashita came back into favour, following the crumbling of Tojo's power. He commanded the 14th Area Army, and was tasked with defending the Philippines. He had over 250,000 men in defensive groups, and specifically, on the Philippines, he did not declare Manila an open city. With this, it was said that defending militaries will not defend the city in battle. This was an action done to save the lives of people within the city, but instead a huge battle and further slaughter occurred. There was brutal street-to-street fighting, and inside of Manila, it's believed that around 100,000 civilians were killed. But at the end of the Second World War, there was a desire by the Allies to punish many members of the Japanese military's command, and they wanted to bring them to justice for the actions of many of the soldiers who were under their command. Some lower-ranking soldiers were executed for their specific actions and slaughter. However, General Yamashita fell into Allied hands, and between October and December 1945, he was brought to trial in Manila to answer for charges of war crimes relating to the horrors that occurred in the city. He was also asked to answer to charges relating to the deaths of civilians and prisoners of war. He was seen as responsible for the actions, and it was claimed that he nodded his head in agreement when others asked whether they should execute prisoners without a trial. There were other accusations, including that he failed in his duty to protect others, as he could not prevent the horrific war crimes which were being conducted by his soldiers, and it was stated that Yamashita had claimed, "Wipe out the whole Philippines," since everyone in the islands were either guerrillas or active supporters of the guerrillas. With this was seen as his intention to order the slaughter of civilians. But his defence was staunch in the fact that they claimed that Yamashita was not directly involved in war crimes, and he denied that he knew about what his men were doing. He claimed that if he had caught his men slaughtering, assaulting and pillaging, then he could have punished them severely. He claimed that, "My command was as big as MacArthur's or Lord Louis Mountbatten's. How could I tell if some of my soldiers misbehaved themselves? It was impossible for any man in my position to control every action of his subordinate commanders, let alone the deeds of individual soldiers. The charges are completely new to me. If they had happened and I had known about them, I would have punished the wrongdoers severely. But in war, someone has to lose. What I am really being charged with is losing the war." Despite his claims, this did not prevent the court finding General Yamashita guilty of war crimes and sentencing him to death. There are still some today who believe that he was wrongfully sentenced to death and executed, and that he was a fair commander, but this is disputed heavily. General Yamashita's defence counsel tried to appeal to overturn the execution order, but it was confirmed, and he was then locked up inside of Los Banos Laguna prison camp, 30 miles to the south of Manila. He remained locked up in his cell until the date of the executioner came. On the 23rd of February 1946, the 60-year-old Japanese general was taken from his prison cell and into the courtyard where a gallows had been created. He climbed the 13 steps with the assistance of the prison guards and was then passed over to the executioner. Whilst the noose was being secured, he was asked for any final words, and Yamashita then answered with a speech stating, "As I said in the Manila Supreme Court that I have done with all my capacity, so I don't shame in front of the gods for what I have done when I died. But if you say to me, you do not have the ability to command the Japanese army, I should say nothing for it, because it is my own nature. Now our war criminal trial, going under your kindness and right. I know that all your Americans and American military affairs always has tolerance and rightful judgment. When I have been investigated in Manila Court, I had a very good treatment, a kindful attitude from your good-natured officers, who protected me all the times. I never forget for what they've done for me, even if I had died. I don't blame my executioner. I'll pray the gods bless them. Please send my thankful word to Colonel Clark and Lieutenant Colonel Feldhaus, Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks, Major Guy, Captain Sandberg, Captain Reel at Manila Court, and Colonel Arnaud, I thank you." He seemed calm in his final moments, and then the executioner placed a cap over his head, and the noose was then adjusted and fastened around his neck. Final checks were made, and he was shuffled over the trapdoor, and when the executioner was happy, he thrust open the trapdoor, and General Yamashita plunged to his death, and within a few minutes he was declared dead. The execution of General Tomoyuki Yamashita is one which is still debated 80 years on today. He was executed for what was known as a command responsibility, and with this he was judged criminally responsible for the actions of his soldiers that were under his command. Specifically whether he ordered executions and war crimes, this still remains unclear today, but for the fact he did not intervene or stop horrific actions, he was sent to the gallows. But General Yamashita was a feared general and opponent for the British and the Allied nations, and his command led to the worst capitulation in British military history during World War II, with the huge surrender in Singapore. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.